I never thought I'd feel physically sick at the sound of my own last name. The lawyer's voice was calm, almost mechanical, as he read from the will. To my son, Alex Caldwell, I leave my estate in its entirety. And then he stopped. That was it. Which city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And hey, make sure you watch till the end. Something's going to happen that you won't see coming. I blinked, frozen in place. My heart pounded so loudly it echoed in my ears. I searched the lawyer's face, waiting for him to continue something, anything. My name never came. Beside me, Alex shifted slightly in his chair. I turned toward him slowly, like my body already knew what I was about to see. And there it was, just the corner of his mouth curled up into a smug little smirk. He didn't even bother to hide it. His shoulders relaxed like he'd just won a game I never agreed to play. My throat tightened, but I couldn't look away. His eyes met mine, and I swear to God, I saw satisfaction. No grief, no confusion. Just quiet, self-satisfied confidence, like he knew this was coming all along. I felt cold all over. My fingers trembled under the table, gripping the hem of my black dress, the same one I wore to our father's funeral just days ago. I cried. Through that entire service, Alex barely shed a tear. He stood tall, gave the eulogy like he was accepting a promotion. But I told myself everyone grieves differently. Now, I wasn't so sure. The room was quiet. I could hear the faint ticking of an old wall clock behind Mr. Halbert's desk. It was counting the seconds I needed to process what had just happened, seconds I'd never get back. Why wasn't I mentioned? Did he forget me? Did I do something wrong? My thoughts spiraled. Alex finally spoke, his voice low, feigning something close to sadness. It was Dad's final wish, he said, shaking his head. He told me he didn't want to split things up, said it would just cause more problems. I turned to face him fully, every movement heavy, like my body didn't want to move. What? My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. He shrugged. Don't take it personally, Emma. He just wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. Handled. The word slammed into my chest like a brick. Dad and I had spoken just days before he slipped into that final coma. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't worry, Emmy. I've taken care of everything. You'll be all right." Those were his exact words. I knew what he meant, and yet, I wasn't even in the will. I looked back at Mr. Halbert, hoping desperately for some mistake, a missed page, something to make this make sense, but he just cleared his throat and continued, business as usual. Flipping to the next document, I wanted to scream, to cry, but I couldn't even move. Beside me, Alex leaned back slightly in his chair, one arm draped casually over the backrest like he was settling in for a victory lap, and that's when I noticed at his fingers, there was a faint ink stain near the base of his thumb. The kind you get from signing a lot of papers, or forging something. My skin prickled. A sharp chill slid down my spine. No way. He wouldn't, would he? But the thought had already burrowed into my brain, refusing to leave. Something was wrong, and deep down, I knew it. And no matter how scared I was going to find out what really happened. Because if Alex thought he could bury the truth with our father, he was dead wrong. The rain had started just as I stepped out of the car, not a downpour, just a light, persistent drizzle that made the air feel colder than it really was. The sky hung gray, like the clouds. Couldn't decide whether to cry or hold it all in. Kind of like me. Mr. Halbert's law office sat on the corner of Elm and Wallace, tucked between a flower shop and an insurance agency. It looked more like a library than a legal office. Dark wood, heavy iron door handles, tall windows that stared blankly at the street like they'd seen too much. I stood there for a moment, umbrella trembling in my hand, wondering if walking in would change everything forever. Turns out, it already had. I pushed open the door. A soft chime rang overhead. The scent hit me first, old paper, leather, and something faintly minty. The same aftershave Dad used to wear. My throat tightened. I wasn't ready for that. The waiting room was quiet, decorated in deep green and dark mahogany. A tall grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner. No distractions, no warmth, just stillness, and the heavy weight of what was coming. I was the first to arrive. Of course, I was always first, early to school, early to appointments, early to the hospital when Dad needed someone. Meanwhile, Alex had a habit of showing up when it was convenient, and somehow still getting all the credit. I sat at the edge of a leather chair, smoothing the wrinkles in my black dress. The same one I wore to the funeral. The same one I hadn't even packed away. I just pulled it back on that morning and hoped it didn't still smell like lilies. And grief. My reflection in the office mirror looked pale, hollow. My eyes were puffy. My hair pinned back in a rush, like I hadn't cared enough to try. I hadn't. I was tired. So tired. The door creaked behind me. I didn't need to look, I already knew it was him, Alex. His footsteps were light, confident. He always walked like the world was waiting for him. Hey, he said casually, like we were meeting for coffee. I turned my head slightly, gave him a stiff nod. Hey. He sat across from me, one leg crossing over the other, his suit dark navy, tailored perfectly, like it belonged to him, like he belonged here. He looked every bit the golden child, but I knew better. I'd seen what was underneath, manipulative, cold, always 2 steps ahead while pretending it was charm. Still, I tried to keep my anger quiet. Dad wouldn't have. Wanted a fight. Mr. Halbert entered a moment later, his presence as stiff as the starch in his collar. He nodded at us both and motioned us into the inner office. The room felt colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the heavy curtains, or maybe it was just the absence of Dad. He used to fill every room. Now there was just space. We sat, Alex to my right, Mr. Halbert behind his desk, and me, gripping the handkerchief Dad left in his hospital drawer the last time I visited. I tucked it into my purse that day, just a piece of cloth. But it grounded me. Mr. Halbert cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and opened the folder, as per Robert Caldwell's last will and testament. I closed my eyes, bracing myself. I had no idea the next sentence would crack everything wide open. The entirety of his estate, assets, property, business holdings is to be transferred to his son, Alex Caldwell. That was it. I sat there, still, waiting, barely breathing, waiting for the rest, the part where he mentioned me, my name, a single word, but the silence after Alex's name stretched too long, too cold. Mr. Halbert glanced up, then back down again, flipping to another page. He wasn't going to say it. He wasn't going to say me. My stomach dropped like I'd just stepped off a cliff I didn't see coming. I blinked, hard. My ears were ringing, like a buzzing swarm inside my skull, like a warning siren no one else could hear. I looked at Alex, hoping he'd be just as confused, that he'd shake his head, whisper something like, "This isn't right," but he didn't. He just nodded slowly, like this made perfect sense. Then he leaned forward slightly, folded his hands on the table, and spoke softly like a doctor delivering bad news. It was Dad's final wish, he said. He didn't want to split things up, said I'd know how to handle it all. I stared at him, my mouth opened, but no sound came out. Handle it? What did that even mean? Alex tilted his head just enough to appear empathetic, but not so much that he looked guilty. His eyes flickered to mine with that same practiced warmth he wore at the funeral. Not a single real tear, just performance. My voice finally returned, scratchy, thin. He told me everything would be fair, I whispered. Just a week before, I stopped myself. Alex's smile turned almost pitying. You know how Dad was sentimental. Maybe he didn't want to upset you. My heart twisted. That wasn't Dad. He was fair, honest, brutal. Even when it came to the truth, he wouldn't have left something like this like me unspoken. Never. I looked at Mr. Halbert, hoping, praying he'd confirm something was wrong. But he didn't raise an eyebrow. He just kept summarizing legal jargon, like this was any other Tuesday. I tried to swallow, but my throat was bone dry. My hands were clenched so tight in my lap. My nails had carved half moons into my palms. Then I noticed it, Alex's thumb, a faint black smudge near the base ink, maybe a pen stain. It could have been nothing, but the way he angled his hand, like he was hiding it. My pulse spiked, a memory surged forward, hot, fast, violent. The night before Dad passed, I'd been leaving the hospital when I saw Alex in the hallway. He was headed toward Dad's room. He glanced around like he didn't want to be seen. He was holding something, a manila folder. He said he was just saying goodnight, but Dad had already been unconscious. Now, here we were. I couldn't say it out loud, not yet. Not without proof, but every bone in my body was screaming. This wasn't grief. This was deception. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the house, the business, the shares, none of it. What I cared about was the truth, because I knew my father. And this wasn't his final wish. Not even close. I barely heard the rest of the meeting. Words like estate execution, probate, and legal transfer buzzed around the room like wasps, but they didn't land. Didn't matter. I just sat there, nodding occasionally, pretending to listen. Inside, my thoughts were a storm. The moment we stepped out of Mr. Halbert's office, Alex clapped me lightly on the shoulder like we were teammates who'd just wrapped up a game. I flinched. I know this was a shock, he said, Fox. Sympathy dripping from every word. But trust me, Dad knew what he was doing. I'll make sure you're okay. His words slid over me like oil, slippery, insincere. His eyes didn't match his voice. They were cold, calculating. I forced a small smile and nodded, biting the inside of my cheek so I wouldn't say what I really wanted to. You're lying. I didn't know how yet, but I would. I climbed into my car and sat there in silence. Rain tapped lightly on the windshield, soft, steady. I gripped the steering wheel as the memories looped through my head. The will, the ink on his thumb, that manila folder. Something about it all haunted me. Then it hit me, Dad's tablet, that clunky old thing. I'd set it up in his hospital room so he could video call me when I wasn't there. And a few weeks before, after a nurse mentioned Dad seemed disoriented, I'd installed a nanny cam app. Nothing fancy, just a way to check in. He barely remembered it was on, and I'd forgotten too, until now. My fingers fumbled as I yanked my phone from my bag and opened the app. My breath caught. It was still linked, footage stored in the cloud, days worth, silent, uneventful. And then I found it. The date and time matched, 10:42 p.m. the night before Dad passed. I pressed play. The video was grainy but clear enough. Alex entered the room alone. He glanced around, then quietly closed the door behind him, locked it. From beneath his coat, he pulled a folder. The folder. He approached Dad's bed. No sadness, no grief, just business. He pulled out a document, placed it on Dad's chest, lifted Dad's limp hand, and guided it, one shaky stroke at a time, across the signature line. I dropped my phone. My lungs forgot how to breathe. He'd forged the will, right there over our father's unconscious body. That wasn't just theft. It was betrayal in its purest form. Rage replaced my grief. It flared hot in my chest, pushing out every ounce of helplessness I'd felt. I picked up the phone, saved the footage, backed it up twice. Then a third time. No confrontation. Not yet. I wasn't going to shout in the dark. I was going to expose him in the light. By the next morning, I had the footage on a USB drive, an email, my phone, and even texted to myself just in case. I showed up at Mr. Halbert's office early. Again, the rain had stopped but the air was heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. Alex arrived 5 minutes late, of course. Morning, he said, brushing dust off his blazer, as if he hadn't just committed a crime. He turned to Mr. Halbert. Are we finalizing everything today? I said nothing, waited, until Mr. Halbert reached for the pen. That's when I spoke. Before you sign anything, I think you both need to see this. They turned. Mr. Halbert blinked, confused. Alex's smile didn't falter, but his eyes did. They narrowed slightly. I pulled out my phone and hit play. There's footage from Dad's hospital room the night before he died. Alex scoffed. Emma, come on, are we really doing this? But I held up the phone, steady this time, and let the truth play. There was no sound, just the haunting image. Alex entering the room, locking the door, lifting Dad's hand, forcing the signature. Mr. Halbert leaned in, his face drained of color. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I set up a safety camera on Dad's tablet, I said. It recorded everything. Alex went pale. This is ridiculous. It doesn't prove anything. It shows you forging a signature, I said, calm, sharp. While Dad was unconscious. Mr. Halbert stood, pushing back from his desk. This changes everything. We're halting the process immediately. I'll need to bring this to the ethics board and initiate a formal inquiry. Alex's mouth opened, then closed again. His confident posture collapsed. He looked like he'd been punched hard. He reached for the phone. I pulled it back. Don't, I said, and for the first time in my life, he had nothing to say. The silence was heavy, but for once, it didn't suffocate me. It freed me, because Alex hadn't just stolen from me. He tried to erase me. And Dad had always told me, Emma, the truth always finds its way out. This time, it came through me. The investigation didn't take long. The signature? A confirmed forgery. The original will, filed months earlier, split everything equally. Just like Dad said. Fair. Honest. Like the man I knew. Alex was charged with fraud. His lawyer cut a deal to avoid prison, but the damage was done. He lost everything: the house, the business, the trust. I haven't spoken to him since. He left a voicemail once, saying it was all a misunderstanding. I didn't reply, because Dad wouldn't have wanted to be betrayed either. Weeks later, I moved back into the family home. It was quiet but not empty. Dad was everywhere, in the bookshelves, his toolbox, the record player, a letter he left inside, his favorite novel. Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But know this: I've always trusted you to do the right thing. You're stronger than you know. I didn't feel strong during most of this, but Dad saw it in me, and I see it now. I used part of the inheritance to start a scholarship in his name. Donated the rest to the cancer center that treated him. Felt right, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth and closure. Sometimes, the truth doesn't scream. It whispers through ink smudges. In memories that don't line up. In the quiet feeling you just can't shake. So when that voice inside you says something's not right, listen. It could be the only thing standing between you and the truth.